Hello everyone, welcome to today's presentation on developing musicianship in children's choir. I'm really excited about this topic. The reason I wanted to talk more about this today is because I think church music programs are a wonderful way to teach children about God and their faith, but also to teach them about music and singing. I think we can do both. Being intentional about planning and cultivating musicianship in our young singers all throughout the year is a wonderful place to start. Today's presentation is going to be geared towards children's choir directors in church settings. Those of you who might be looking for inspiration, ideas, and lots of practical suggestions for what to do on a week-to-week basis in your teaching. We'll talk about what musicianship is, all the different ways that you can develop it and cultivate it throughout your year, and I'll share 10 practical suggestions for developing musicianship little by little in your rehearsals each week. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, there we go. Musicianship, what does that word mean? It can actually be defined a few different ways. Some might say it's the skills you have as a musician, things like listening, hearing, singing, playing, creating. Others might say it's the ability to think in sound, or audiate is another word we use to describe that. This means to hear music in your head without any sounds being present. You could think of this like the ability to read a book silently. So you're hearing the words in your head as you read them, but you're not actually saying them out loud. And both of those, reading silently and hearing music without any sound being present, are both things that are developed through exposure and experience. There are many different aspects of musicianship, all things that we can touch on in our rehearsals throughout the year. Things like listening, which might include pitch and intervals, phrasing, dynamics, musical form. Singing, which might include breathing, vowels, tone production. Creating or improvising, making music spontaneously in the moment. Expression might include things like phrasing and dynamics. Tonality might include singing on solfege or understanding the difference between a melody, a bass line, a harmony part. Rhythm versus steady beat, what's the difference between those two things? That category might include things like counting or chanting and moving. And then reading obviously includes music notation, but it can also include music symbols and intervals. So as you can see, there's tons of content here. There's tons of things that we can really dig into and include in our rehearsals throughout the year to cultivate various aspects of musicianship in our young singers. Which brings me to the meat of today's presentation, 10 practical things that you can do to develop musicianship in your children's choir week by week all throughout the year. Number 1 on the list, choose warm-ups that prepare new concepts. Researchers indicate that it's important to hear and sing patterns before actually seeing them. And preparing new concepts might include things like legato. What does it mean to sing legato? What does it sound like? What does it feel like in the voice? Same thing with steps versus skips. How are they different? What do they feel like in the voice? What do they sound like? Without actually seeing any notation showing you the difference, but just listening to the differences first and experiencing them in your own voice. You could also do this with dynamics, melodic patterns that might come from a new anthem or a piece that you're planning to introduce, dotted rhythms or more complex rhythm patterns that might be unfamiliar. All of these things can be prepared through warm-ups that you do right at the beginning of your rehearsals. Josh Petty of the Indianapolis Children's Choir says warm-ups are where you teach your choir how to sing. And here's an example of something that you might use right at the beginning of your rehearsal to get your singers focused and ready to sing. Get their voices warmed up. This is a simple Alleluia descending 5-note scale, but it goes through all of the important vowels that we use in singing. So it's a great way to introduce those vowels and talk about vowel production, tone production, phrasing, legato singing, stepwise motion, etc., all without going into too many details. You're letting the singers experience all of those things through the warm-up before you really dig into them in the context of a piece of music. Number 2 is sing acapella as much as possible. Young singers really need time to learn how to use their voices and to manipulate them. So singing acapella gives them an opportunity to really listen to each other and learn how to adjust their voice in the context of what's happening around them. It also gives them an opportunity to learn how to predict melodic and rhythm patterns instead of just becoming really good at responding to the keyboard or the piano. And they can focus more on the shape and the direction of the vocal line without the distraction of an accompaniment in the beginning. This is especially important when you're first learning something, that you're really just focusing on that melody, the shape, and the phrasing of that without being distracted by another part that's doing something different. Number 3 is to use props and other visuals. This helps make learning fun and memorable. Statistics show that only 10% of people remember things that they hear, only 20% remember things that they read, but a remarkable 80% of people remember things that they see and do. So think about ways that you can incorporate more visuals into your rehearsals. You could do things like draw phrase shapes in the air or on the board if you have one. You could use a tennis ball to show good singing mouth shape. Have you ever seen that? You cut a slit across the tennis ball and then you squeeze the sides to make it look like a mouth that's opening. You could use color wheels or paint chips to show dynamic variations. You could use balloons, play a balloon game where the children have to keep the balloon up in the air for the duration of a whole note or a measure or whatever kind of concept you're introducing to them. As many things as you can do to incorporate visuals and props to help make music, which is an oral art, more tangible for them, the better. Okay, number 4 on our list is chant the rhythm of a piece. This is a great practice strategy for a new piece or a section of a piece, and it's an opportunity to break the piece apart into layers. So in this case, we'd just be looking at the rhythm of a piece without looking at the melody or expressive elements just yet. Here's an example of what this might look like or sound like. This, again, would not be for the children to read necessarily, but you could have this in your notes or just in your head as you're teaching. When we chant the rhythm, we speak with inflection instead of chanting like a robot where everything is way low in the voice. Encourage your singers to have rises and falls in their voice and make it more dynamic and interesting. So an example of chanting this rhythm might be ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. You can use a neutral syllable like ba, and once the rhythm is more familiar, then you could switch to the text of the anthem or the song that you're working on. Depending on the age and level of your choir, if you're teaching by rote, which is a memorization technique that's based on imitation and repetition, then you would chant a phrase like this and have your singers echo back, and as long as they can do it correctly and confidently, then you can move on to another pattern. If there was still some hesitation, you might do the same phrase a couple of times until they've really gotten it. If your choir is to the point where they are starting to read some music notation, you might pull out some rhythm patterns from the piece and have them on a board or a place where everybody can see them and point to the rhythm as you chant it and point as they chant it again. So you're sort of combining some rote techniques with some reading techniques there. Number 5 on the list is similar to number 4. This is singing on a neutral syllable. So once you've chanted the rhythm, then you can start looking at just the melodic elements of a piece and sing through that melody line on a neutral syllable like bum or do. Take the text out of the equation for a moment so you don't have to worry with how to pronounce words or how to sing them or vowels or consonants or anything like that. You're just focusing on the beauty of that melodic line. So again, here's an example of what this might look like for you or in your head if you're teaching. Focus on lyricism and phrase shape, breath, dynamics, intervals, etc. Just all the melodic elements and the rhythm, of course, at this point. And again, depending on the level of your choir, the age of your singers, if you're teaching by rote, you would sing this on a neutral syllable and have their choir echo back. If your choir is beginning to read and they have this in front of them, they're holding a copy of the music or they're reading it on a board, you could point to the notes as they go by and kind of help them draw the shapes of when the melody rises and falls. Number 6 is to use movement to develop a sense of steady beat. Listen to a piece of music, something with a steady beat, of course, and have the choir tap the steady beat with you. And then you could mix it up by changing the placement of the beat every 4 bars or so. So instead of just tapping on your lap or clapping all the way through, every 4 measures you could change where you're showing the beat. Put it in your heels, or tap on your shoulder, or tap on your nose, or tap on your head, etc., to keep them on their toes. If you have space in your room, you could also have the children get up out of their seats and move around while they listen. No talking, of course, just listening and showing the steady beat. Have them step it, have them hop on one foot, have them clap, have them tap it in different places on their body, like we were just talking about. Anything to get them a little bit more actively engaged in listening and maybe getting some of those mid-rehearsal wiggles out of their system. You could also use clapping games to help teach steady beat. You could use a 4-beat movement sequence while listening to a piece of music too, something like step, step, tap, clap, or tap, tap, clap, clap, that the singers would repeat over and over again as they listen. Movement is also a great way to develop listening skills. So you can teach form, musical form through movement while listening to a piece of music. Do a circle dance where you change direction at different points in the song, different places in the musical form. You go into the middle of the circle and then back out at various points in the music. You can draw phrase shapes in the air for a more lyrical piece as you listen. So have the singers trace with their finger a long slur marking in the air as they listen to the length of the phrases. You could also come up with some corresponding movements for different dynamic levels. So if you have a piece of music that you want to play that starts softly and then has a big crescendo and then ends strong with a nice forte sound at the end or something. Come up with some different movements to go along with that so that singers can listen to what's happening dynamically and show that they understand that with their body movements. You could use a color wheel like this to show tempo markings. Students can come up with different movements to match tempo changes that they might be hearing in the music. You could make a wheel like this that spins with different movement activities or different tempo markings that then they would have to show as they listen. Number 8 is study the score together. I recommend doing this in small sections, so 8 measures, maybe 16 at a time. Piece it together using PowerPoint or Keynote. If you have the technology in your room, that would be great. If not, you can use a large copy of the score and cut the measures apart so you can manipulate it a little bit easier. This is a great way, especially for choirs that are just at the level of starting to read music, to really introduce score reading to them without just handing them all a copy of the music and asking them to follow along. This way, you're actually walking them through what's in the score and what they're looking for. So give them some things to find. Look for patterns, melodic patterns, rhythmic patterns. Find things that look the same. Help them learn how to find the dynamic markings, color code those. Maybe use blue for piano and red for forte, where they find those markings in the score. Have them look for intervals. If intervals is something that you've prepared through warm-ups and prepared orally and now you're introducing the written version of those, have them look for places where they see steps or skips or fourths or fifths if you've gotten that far, and have them mark those in different ways. So put a box around places where you see thirds, or a triangle where you see a fourth, or a starburst where you see a fifth in the music. And again, you can have them do this on an individual copy of music that they're holding with colored pencils or whatever, or you can have one copy that everyone is looking at the front of the room, and have different children come up at different points and help you identify different patterns in the score. Number 9, turn it into a game. Children love games, and this helps to make the learning more fun and memorable too. You can use games to review vowels, intervals, rhythms, solfege, etc. Really, the sky's the limit. You can teach improvisation as a game, doing something like musical questions and answers, where you have sort of a musical dialogue going back and forth. You can use matching games. This is especially good for your younger singers. They can get really good at finding things that are the same and different. So start with matching games and patterns, rhythm patterns or melodic patterns. You can set it up on the floor like this to make sort of a musical memory board. And just like the card game memory, they would flip over one card at a time and then try to find its match somewhere on the playing surface. And finally, number 10 on our list is create opportunities for musical decision making. Reflection is a vital component of learning. It's an opportunity to put their newfound musical skills and knowledge into practice, and it gives children that all-important sense of ownership and sense of responsibility in the process. We all know as musicians the importance of learning how to make musical decisions, and teaching our young singers how to do this right from the beginning instead of waiting until they're however old or at whatever level. Young singers can make informed musical decisions. Give them the power of choice and to have them participate in making decisions that you do as a choir together. To sum up today, one of my favorite quotes ties in really well with number 10 on the list. It's attributed to Benjamin Franklin, and he says, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn." Before we wrap up for today, I wanted to make sure you knew about the new online training course specifically for children's choir directors in church settings. It's called Directing a Church Children's Choir 101. Whether you're a full-time staff member or a dedicated volunteer, whether you have a music degree or not, whether you lead a small group of 6 singers on Wednesday nights or oversee a large graded choir program, you'll learn practical skills and useful step-by-step processes for planning and teaching on a week-to-week basis and growing your ministry. Here's a quick look at what's included in the course. You'll get 4 45-minute instructional video lessons that are pre-recorded by me and released gradually over the course of 4 weeks. So you get one new lesson each week. You'll also have lifetime access to the course videos and materials. So you can always go back and review your favorite content again or rewatch something if you need to. You'll also get a comprehensive workbook that corresponds with the video lessons for each module. That includes helpful charts and templates and worksheets and things that you can just plug in and use in your ministry right away. I'll also be sending out weekly emails with notes, assignments, and action steps to help you work your way through the course. And as a bonus, you'll get access to our online community with fellow enrollees and alums who have taken the course before. This is a great place to network, ask questions, and share ideas and resources, not only while you're in the class, but also going forward. Here's a look at the course overview. There's 4 modules. The first module is focused on planning the choir year. We'll begin by talking about how to foster spiritual growth in children's choir, things like teaching children about church and worship, hymns and songs for children, prayers for choirs, devotional resources, and meaningful ways for children to participate in worship throughout the year. Then we'll go over the details of actually planning out your choir year, including monthly themes, scripture memory verses, monthly hymns or songs, activities and projects, mission work ideas, things you can do to help keep the children engaged and connected. In Module 2, we'll talk about working with children's voices, the importance of vocal exploration, breath and movement, warm-ups, tessitura and range. And I'll also share a few ideas for adding in something fun and silly to keep your kids engaged. We'll also go over the ins and outs of how to choose music for your choir and what I look for in a new anthem. Module 3 is about planning your rehearsals from week to week because being prepared and ready to teach is so important. So I'll go over some score study tips and tricks, ways to prepare and introduce new musical concepts, and my best rehearsal advice for pacing, sequencing, and some fun musical games and activities you can do with your group. In the final module, we'll talk about preparing to teach, and we'll go over some things related to developing musicianship in more detail than we went over today. I'll also talk some about choral methods, things like breath and vowels, consonants, tone, blend, singing posture, things like that. Also talk about vocal modeling, conducting and gestures, and using visual aids. Ready to dive in? Join the waiting list today and be the first to know when this course is offered again. Right now I'm offering it 2 times a year. You can sign up at ashleydanu.com musicianship.org/courses to get on that list, and I will email you first to let you know the next time it's available. That's it for today. I hope this presentation inspires you to plan ways to develop musicianship in your children's choir each and every week. Thanks for taking the time to join me. I hope to see some of you in the Directing a Church Children's Choir 101 course very soon. Bye, guys.